Unfortunately, with being out due to work, it's been like almost a month since I've been able to continue the study in Hosea. We've been studying the book of Hosea, which is one of the, what they call minor prophets, but I've heard from a Jewish scholar that even the Jewish people believe that this is one of the most important prophecies in the Old Testament. We're currently in the book of Hosea, chapter 10, verse 5. We're going to go back over verse 5, which I normally do the last verse in which we left off on to connect everything. And I do have some of the stuff online for anyone that wasn't here or have back stuff. And there was a part 14. We're going to go over something close to that. I don't want to go into full detail because it's pretty grim, dark, and deserves its own hour-long discussion. So if you're confused about what I say, Gibeah, and you want to know more, I'll suggest you to go back if you weren't there for that particular day. But let's just go into verse 5 here. The inhabitants of, bad with foreign nouns, Samaria. That confuses me sometimes. Samaria shall fear because the calves of Bath-aven. Now, Samaria was the capital of Israel at the time. At this time, it was called the divided kingdom. There was Judah in the south, which had Jerusalem, but the northern 10 tribes gathered together in what they were called Israel, and their capital was Samaria. Which I find odd because I think that was another older nation. So those two names are pretty sure different. And the calves of Bath-aven were these idols in which they established, these golden calves in which they produced, which they were drawn to idolatry. Back when they left Egypt, one of the things that they did when Moses went up to go see God was they made golden calves. I have no idea why they think the image of a cow is so appealing. I don't know, maybe they like the cheese. I don't know why, but it seems they constantly go back to this idolatry of calves. In the city of Bath-aven, every time you get the word Beth, like Bethlehem, you're thinking about house. But with Aven, there's two words that we can associate when we draw it out of the Hebrew. It is emptiness or iniquity. So the house of iniquity, isn't this interesting? They fear for the calves, this idolatry coming from the house of iniquity, of sin. The house of sin. I mean, that's a terrible name for your city. For the people thereof shall mourn over these calves, and the priests thereof that rejoiced in it. So the priests established it because they were the priests of this particular idolatrous god or idol, and they rejoiced over it, but they're going to be in mourning. But why are they in mourning? For the glory thereof, because it has departed from them. When we put up idols, it's filling for a season, right? It only brings joy for a small period of time, but that joy diminishes over time because it's not the one true God that actually brings joy and happiness and peace that's eternal from everlasting to everlasting. He's infinite. This idol is finite. Therefore, the joy from it is going to be numbered. But it's a little bit more than just because it was an infinite, minuscule. There's even in the book of Isaiah, which is interesting, the names Joshua, Isaiah, Hosea come from the same words that we get the name Jesus from, which means salvation. I find this fascinating, but in the book of Hosea, in chapter 44, which I'm not going to go into a lot of it, it's verses 10 through 20. I'm going to bounce around a little bit on that. If you want to dig deeper, you can look into it further. They talk about making idols. And they're talking about it being formed from gold, but it profits nothing in verse 10. And then further on in 14, it talks about how someone hews down a tree, talking about cedars, cypress, and oaks. In previous verses, we're talking about how they like the shade there of those trees. But these trees have, especially if you speak to like a person that has any history of Wicca or any of the earth worshiping systems, these are trees with spiritual significance. They have symbolism to them. But they cut down these trees, and eventually he talks about he cuts one half and burns food on one half of this tree, and the other half he carves into an idol. And he talks about how absolutely foolish this idea is. If I can get the exact. He burneth part of it in the fire, in which he eateth flesh, and he roasteth it, and is satisfied. He is warmth from himself, and saith, Ah, I am warm, and I have seen the fire. And the residue thereof he makes a god, and even a graven image, and he falls down unto it, and worships it, and prays unto it, and says, Deliver me, for thou art my God. Get this idea. He's always after what is going to answer his desires. And that's exactly our problem here today. We think, oh, this is thousands of years, and I can't relate to having my belly full and that being my God. But like, we watch TV and we go after all these things that we find that will fill this meaningless life because we have this void. We're here to worship God and to know God. That is exactly what He made us for. And if you act like there is not one, would you not know Him? If there's a name to God, it isn't just a generic force. You're going to have that void, and it's going to be constantly being tried to be filled with something finite when you need something infinite to fill it. And it's just extremely amusing to how he puts this. They have not known or understand, for he hath shut their eyes. And actually, this could refer to God shutting their eyes to this, to not revealing himself to that. That they do not see for their hearts. And their hearts are stone, they need to be made flesh here. That they did not understand, nor consider in their hearts, neither is it known their understanding to say, I have burned part in the fire, yea, I also baked bread upon the coals thereof. I have roasted flesh and eaten it, and shall I make the residue thereof an abomination, which is the idol. What is left over of something that I pretty much use? It is ash, it is nothing. But I'm going to make something abominable, this idolatrous. And what is said in 10 benefits no one. Shall I fall down to the stalk of a tree? A foolishness here. He hath fed on ashes, and a deceived heart hath turned inside him, that he cannot deliver his soul, nor say, is there not a lie in my right hand? Finding interesting. That was 20 of Isaiah, Isaiah 44, 10 through. Do you have a different word? You probably have a different word for lie. I've seen other translations looking up the Yeah, but back in Hosea here, they're worshiping an idol, and they don't see what Isaiah said in Hosea, but they were contemporaries. There was probably being a separation of as little as maybe 400 or 300 years between these two people. But they were addressing the same problem, the same illness, the same disease prevalent in Israel, which was idolatry.
It's the same disease now.
Oh, absolutely. All sin falls into that. We want to say the 7 deadly sins, but it's really just one. It has different heads, if you will. It's idolatry. It's the idea that I want to make something more important than God. And when it boils down to it, it's normally our own desires. And further on to this, we're going to see there's 2 ways, and the Bible says it. One broad, one narrow. One is God is Lord and King and knows what's best for me, and there is exactly the same thing that Satan fell for. It's, I would want to put my throne above the stars of heaven. And we do that in the form of let me satisfy this outside of God's ordained means. Because every sin that there is just a corruption of a good blessing God has for you. Example. There's a sin of fornication or adultery. But there is ordained marriage, which should be safer and with someone you trust here, if you get what I mean. Adultery is with someone that you really have, there's no commitment or stake at any of it. To be honest, anyone can just walk away and they really don't owe you anything. There's no agreed covenant, now is there?
Can I say something real quick? When you were talking about just how stuff don't change from the beginning of time to the end of time, we're always going to look for something to fill that void, right? The idolatry, the filling something with it. It reminded me of a verse I used in Micah chapter 6, verse 8, because it's Micah talking, the same thing as prophets, whether a major prophet or a minor prophet, it makes no difference. But they're always talking to the children of Israel because they were knuckleheads, right? They were constantly, he would bless them, then they'd go back. And he would bless them, then they'd go back. He'd bless them, then go back. And in Micah chapter 6, verse 7, I'll start in, it says, will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams or with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for the transgression, the fruit of my body for the sins of my soul? What are you talking about? Because they had rules, they had regulations, they had ways that God wanted things done. And Micah tells them very simply, this is the key verse of Micah in verse 8. He has showed thee, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of thee? This ain't never changed. He said, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. That's it. It ain't changed. And it's the same today. Same 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, and it's the same in 2020. Same thing. To walk justly, to love mercy, and to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. Yeah, they could never get it. I mean, they do it for a while, but that's what we do. We do it for a while.
Yeah, but we sit here and we think that the Bible was sat down and written from cover to cover in 1 year, or one setting, or one lifetime. But the amount of separation between Micah and Hosea would be hundreds of years here. And Isaiah says, like, I don't prefer sacrifices, but mercy. I desire mercy. Those are exact quoted words, pretty much. Because it's like there's a unified author out there.
Yep.
That's crazy talk, isn't it?
That's crazy.
Yeah, something outside of this universe pressing in to want to personally know each and every one of us. Has a personal stake because he loves you, not because he needs anything from you.
And the fact that he knew us before we were ever in our mother's womb.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go to verse 6. That shall be carried unto Assyria. This is talking about the calf, but also it's symbolizing that the northern kingdoms are going to be taken into slavery into the kingdom of Assyria. For a present to the king Jeram, Ephraim, which is a nickname for Israel here, Ephraim shall receive shame, and Israel shall be ashamed of what? His own counsel. What are we talking about? There's two ways here. They wanted to do their own way, their own counsel. They did not seek counsel of God in any sense. This was the thoughts of man. They went their own way. And yes, they should be ashamed. God's trying to draw them to shame of this. Come on, there's a simpler path here. Why do you got to keep making your own mistakes when you can learn from what I tell you is going to be a mistake?
Dude, you just put parenting in a nutshell.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Why do you make your own mistakes? Learn from my mistakes. That's the whole point about parenting. But yet kids don't want to listen, right? I mean, that's about, our kids do the same thing. It's funny now, they'll make comments, I understand why you did what you did now. I understand why you did. Well, they're 30 and 27. Of course they do now, but I'm like, yeah, but remember when I told you when you were 14 and starting high school, I said, I don't plan on being your friend. But now we're friends. You're like, well, it makes sense now. Because that's just parenting 101.
This also brings up one of the reasons why the Bible says to speak your faults one to another.
Yeah.
there were so many things that I could look in my life as a kid, and I was like, that's clearly something I shouldn't do because I've seen someone else do that. And then there was things that people didn't speak very much of, like relationship advice. They're very seldom talking about the mistakes done there. And I did not glean much from that, and I suffer the consequences of that. There's some things that we are too ashamed to speak of, but if we would speak of them, we can learn and grow from that. But it's one of the reasons why we should bring up what our faults are, because one person can be strong in that area and counsel us on how to deal with that.
Well, then that's why we need everybody. We need each other. We need each other, because I can't speak to certain things that other people can speak to. I just can't. I ain't gonna do that. And I was an alcoholic. If you want to talk about that, we can talk about that. I mean, we can talk about our marriage. We've been together since we were 14. I can discuss that. I'm not good at that. But at least I think I'm all right at it. I'm all right at that. Let me ask you, Lori. But yeah, that's why we need each other. We need each other to learn. And what did you go through? Tell me how you got through that, or right? Because I got somebody that's struggling and I can't tell them. And that's why it's a key, man. It's a key.
Well, you just said a key right there. We have to know our own strengths, but we also have to know our own weaknesses. There's a lot of times that we're weak in something that, that we just don't want to talk about. We don't want people to know that we have a weakness or that we have a frailty, in our lives. So we would rather just kind of act like that it's not there. But everybody has something, and when we begin to, say, I'm going to draw strength from you in this area, and then somebody else says, well, I'm going to draw strength from you in this area. We're realizing that, I say it a lot, but the day of the Lone Ranger is over. Nobody can do everything by themselves. They just cannot. I'm dependent on other people for other things, and I know that. I don't pretend that I don't need them. But in another area, they might need somebody, and rather than to admit that we need somebody, we try to act like we're everything. And that's where we fall. That's where, I really believe that scripture that says pride cometh before the fall. I really believe that has so much to do with that. We just don't want to admit that we just aren't good at everything.
It reminds me of a verse that, not a verse, put that out there, I don't want to compare it to scripture, but something that C.S. Lewis wrote. He was talking about Christians when it comes to knowing their sexuality, because that's a big area that a lot of Christians stumble and fall, and even through marriage lives struggle. He said that Christians should know their own sexuality like Sherlock Holmes knew Moriarty. Like, the most enemy to you. Great detail. I mean, that was a detective story here, that metaphor I like. But you can replace that with any possible sin that trips you up here. Really can. You should know your enemy just as well. If it becomes financially, when it comes to again, it seems always central in pride because it's always this idea of building oneself up.
Well, fear too. We don't want to admit that there's fears. We fear of so many things. I think about people that have sickness. I've never had cancer, but I've had family members, and when the doctor tells them that it's terminal, their fear is so great that they die of fear. They die of fear. So, there's many things that can be those things that trip that.
Yeah, and I think we touched on something here. A good safety net or antidote for this issue is clearly coming in fellowship.
That's right.
Us as the congregation, truly being close here. Look, if you see on a Sunday morning, it's everybody. I love when it's Thursday night because it's like, hey, everyone's on the same road because they enjoy each other. I'm not saying we have any difficulty with anybody. It's like, when we first started doing this, it was just a revelation to me. It's like, oh man, there's a camaraderie. Here's a band of soldiers here really meaning to dig into the Word of God. But when it comes to those difficulties, it's the band. Everyone has a strong point that should be able to boast for someone else. It says to edify the church. Edify. It's not the building. It's edify the people. And I like to describe a church as a hospital, an infirmary. We need to get you healed up and get you back on the battlefield. And then sometimes you get scrapes and cuts out there speaking doctrine to different people, and you have to come back and get bandaged up and go back out. And if it happens to be that way, I'm more than satisfied with that. As long as we're constantly pushing forward. What? To the kingdom of God.
Do something, not nothing.
Yes. Yes. I'd rather you fight and hold your ground than turn tail. To be honest.
And really, we fight with love.
Yes.
That's how we conquer Satan, is with love.
Any further? When it comes to counsel, there's an interesting verse in Jeremiah 7:24. But they hearken not, nor incline their ear. Incline their ear to what? To God, pleading with them. But walked in their counsels, their own ways. And in their imagination of their evil hearts, their desires, what they dreamed at night, were sinful and sick. And they went backwards. I wasn't even comparing that. And not forward. I didn't even. I didn't even plan that. It wasn't. That's God. I love that. So let's go on to in Hosea. Back and forth. Hosea 10:7. Whereas Samaria, which is the northern kingdoms, their kingdom is cut off as the foam of the water. Now what's up with that? God never intended there to be two kingdoms here. There's not supposed to be a second king. He established Judah, lineage of Christ, etc. So he says, I'm cutting that off. And if you even look in Kings, the northern kingdom's kings weren't that good. Constantly not drawing to God, but away into their own lust, into the other kingdoms, and wheeling and dealing and doing as the world does. But he says, as the foam upon the waters. You know what? The foam don't last forever. It's like another one of those great metaphors God uses for the extent of a human life. Like a breath, the breath of a hand, or short vapor, yes. Short full of trouble? Exactly. Okay, let's go on to 8 here. The high places of Aven. Now, what was Aven? That's Aven, the house of iniquity. So the high places of iniquity, the sin of Israel, those words going, shall be destroyed, and thorns and thistles shall come up on their altars, and they shall say to the mountain, cover us, and to the hills fall on us. Now, ain't that pretty interesting? The thorns and thistles, that was the sign of Adam's first sins. That was the result. This was the symbolism God used in nature for the encroaching of sin taking over things.
Can I give you a picture to go with that?
Yeah.
What was Christ crowned with at his crucifixion? So he was the king. He took over kingship of our sin. That's why it was a crown of thorns.
And we also have those last words there that should sound kind of familiar. They shall say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills fall on us. I'm going to give you context here. They're pretty much pleading that these are the things that are going to subside God's wrath. And we should know, I believe, if I'm getting my memory right, even when Moses went up to the mountain and he saw God, didn't the mountain melt? So a mountain's not going to shield you from the wrath of God. But this is also what is spoken of in Revelation 6.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, and the study through Revelations. Exactly. Revelation 6. They plead that mountains cover us and for the hills to fall on them.
Yeah.
Because of the wrath of the Lamb.
Just to take it away. Yeah.
But this isn't the natural reaction you should have to God's wrath at all. Is fleeing. It should be fall on your face and beg for mercy because God is merciful.
Well, they even cry out for death, and it says death will flee them.
That's such a crazy verse right there. Can you imagine if that's literal and someone tries to commit suicide and just has the result falling and the broken bones, but death doesn't come to them because God's wrath is that kindled. That the mercy of death is not a means out.
No way.
But also, I did a study on Jonah, and Jonah said the reason why he didn't go to Nineveh is he said, I knew you were merciful, you would forgive them, and I wanted you to destroy those people in Nineveh. So what I'm saying is if you're in trouble, ask for mercy. God has got an abundance of this. They want to hide and shield themselves, and they go into the depths of the earth, in the mountains. They build strongholds up there. It's hard to get to. And they actually found in Turkey, like an entire city found, when they were excavating someone's house trying to expand, and they ended up just finding an entire city down there. Well, very well sealed, can only be released from the inside. So this is the thing they did for safety. But I mean, as I said, when Moses went up the mountain, it melted the mountain. Can you imagine the heat of instantly turning rock into like molten lava? This is the power of the God we speak about. As we spoke about earlier, he frustrates the will of nations. How much more can he? He can go and say, hey, people that's upon was the parole board. I saw what's on your computer history. You want that to come out? Because I can kick you out and put someone that I would appoint there.
Yeah.
You could. Simply. I mean, it's not without the world of possibility that that's it. When they try to file a ruling, it just doesn't pick up on some computer somewhere. It's just like, no, just don't. Falls through the bureaucratic, in a good way, falls through bureaucracy in a good way, which we rarely see, but yeah. Let's go ahead and go to number 9. O Israel, thou hast sinned from the days of Gibeah, which I talked about. You can look it up online, and just like Hosea Bible Study, Part 14 or whatever. Gibeah was really, really bad, and I don't want to just stand here for the rest of the 30 minutes and say how bad. It was essentially Sodom and Gomorrah 2.0, way worse than that. Horrible details, but we go into details there, and a lot of people don't want to talk about it. But what it was, these people, everyone was screwed up in the story. And there's supposed to be these men of the city of Gibeah that should have been charged, should have been brought to justice in a way. And the tribes of Israel actually go out and war, and you can also read about it in Judges 19. But in Judges 20, which is what I did not mention in that particular study, they were going to go out to war against these, what would be the words? Children of iniquity, because they even say that. I can finish the 9th verse. O Israel, you have sinned from the days of Gibeah. They have stood in the battle of Gibeah against the children of iniquity. They also call it the sons of Belial, were literally like good for nothings. Is another way you can translate that. Did not overtake them. They didn't actually succeed. They didn't overtake. They did not conquer this wickedness because, like, all the other tribes were at fault too. God was not fully with them. But God wanted to see these people punished. But they failed to be able to do that because they weren't in righteousness to enact God's judgment. We'll go ahead to 10. It is my desire that I should chastise them. He was punishing these people for their wickedness here. Like, horrendously. Someone died in this circumstance, and their reaction to that was appalling. Very unloving, scary story. His desire was to chastise them, which was the destruction of these wicked children of iniquity. And the people shall be gathered against them. and they shall bind themselves in the two furrows. The furrows are when you plow a field, you'll have the two hills where the plow breaks through the ground. And it was bound there. And the interesting comparison here is, at the time, we're at the time that they're speaking of in Hosea, there's two nations. And again, it was against their Levitical law for them to sow two different kinds of seeds in the land of Israel. So they were sowing, by having two different nations warring against themselves, two different seeds, two different ideas. And what was I saying? One idea is go your own way, or go God's way. And you'll see throughout the Bible, it constantly say you went your own way, you went your own way, you went your own way. And what does Jesus say he is? He says he is the way. There is no ambiguity to that. The way. It doesn't say, okay, I want you to go to the second left on the right. There's no, hey Siri, go turn here and there, and then it wasn't updated. He says he is the way. The truth.
That's a picture of them rejecting God as God and King.
Oh, yes. Okay.
That's what he's telling them. You've rejected me as God and as King.
We'll go down to 11. And Ephraim is a heifer that is taught. So it's a trained animal. It's a domesticated animal, if you will. I see a lot of teachers want to compare it to, say, it's a worldly, as in they were taught worldly things in their world. That's a stretch to what I would say. It's more of a illustration than dug from the word here. But it's taught, it's trained, and we see, and it loves to tread out the corn. When they would tread out the corn, they were allowed to freely eat. So they liked fruitfulness. But I passed over the fairness of their neck, which is become the reins or the yoke would be a term. Passed over the yoke, and I will make Ephraim ride, and Judah plow, and Jacob shall break up the clods. So it's someone that wants the fruitfulness, they want the result of doing godly things, but they don't want to do any of the work. They don't want to go out and sow. And we see that with sometimes with a lot of ministers or preachers. They love to see people saved. And I'm saying, I love the idea of seeing people saved and coming to Christ, but I guess I have not been that blessed to see that. I've only actually seen one person turn and saved, and that's my son. But a lot of ministers do not want to do the hard work of going out and constantly ministering and casting out seed. And when it comes to that, I think our next real big opportunity for that is probably going to be around Easter with the egg harvest. So I want people to be praying about, not egg harvest, but when we do the community egg hunt. I want people to pray about that and think about opportunities to really, instead of just having it as a community activity, think of a way to address the gospel to them. I'm thinking about how we can apply this into the future. So just keep that in mind. Pray about the egg hunt as one of our yearly activities. We encourage the community to come out. But you know what? It's hard because you know what? When you're sowing and you're the sower, you don't really know what the benefit's going to be until God shows you what the fruitfulness is of. So I was wanting to compare that to modern day ministering. People like when mega evangelist that speaks and thousands come to get saved, but he doesn't stay in town long enough to see them set free, sanctified, justified, became righteous. The act of actually discipling, the hard work that a community preacher would do, and you can team up with those things.
But you know, Josh, you're saying something right there that we're seeing happening today. You know, we've got our, and I don't really want to call them mega churches, but we've got our churches that have what they call now 3 campuses or 2 campuses or whatever, and the pastor can't fulfill the position of 2 places. So one church, you know, is, I call it the more comfortable church. They watch him on a screen where there's no accountability. There's nobody watching it, and yet, you know, seeing who's really there. We have one that, you know, that comes right here now that was a part of a church like that. He said the first time that the pastor was there, he was all excited because he thought he was going to get to meet the pastor, and he walked up to him and said he acted like that he was an inconvenience. You know, he didn't have time to talk to him. Well, that's the way that a lot of our modern day ministries are. They don't want to go out into the highways and hedges. They do not want to compel others to come in. They want to preach to their poor and no more and feel good about what they've done. But you know what, when we get out into the community, when we get out away from these four walls, we realize that there's a lost and dying world out there that knows nothing. And it's up to us to preach that gospel, you know, not just feel good about what we've done, you know, today or yesterday, but really know that every day is going to account for itself. And, you know, today I was teaching on, you know, where it says, despise not the small beginnings, but then turned right over and it says, you know, that where much is given, much is required. One of the things that small beginning is learning and growing in what you are, you know, your potential. You don't, you know, and I use the CEO, you know, you don't go into a place of business and you say, I'm here to, I'm going to be the CEO now. You have to learn from the very menial of jobs. And, you know, I think about this a lot in ministry. There's a lot of ministries today that are failing because that pastor or that shepherd has never known what it is to truly work the harvest. They don't know what that is. You know, they're expecting somebody else to do it, or they're you know, they're going to have a cell group and they're going to have this, but they themselves have not worked it. You know, when I read this in my Bible, it says 10. It says, I will discipline them at my discretion. Nations will be gathered against them to put them in bondage for their double iniquity. Ephraim is a well-trained calf that loves to thresh, but I will take the yoke on her fine neck, and I will harness Ephraim, and Judah will plow, and Jacob will do the final plowing. In other words, you're going to learn that there's work involved in this. And even in the sinful nature today, we find out that it's easier for us to call sin today an alternative than to call it sin. So we're looking for an easy way out. We don't want to make anybody mad. We don't want to rock the boat, you know. But sin is sin. And ultimately, sin is what sinners do.
And the thing that I was thinking about is that it's each one of our jobs who have come into a relationship with Jesus Christ to now go and spread the gospel. And not just leave it for the preachers to do. You know, and we do start at the beginning, and we learn, right? But even at that, we go and tell what happened to us. That's enough story right there to tell, right? And then you build upon that. You know, it's just like God called me to go volunteer at Grant Hospital. I did not want to do that. I argued, no, I'm not doing that. Okay, I'll do it if you go with me, you know, and he did. But by pushing a book cart, God he took me completely out of my comfort zone and sent me to each room and to ask each person, you know, can I pray for you? And to share the gospel, you know, if they allowed me to do that. But it was a growing thing that we had to do, and that it's just not left for, you know, the preachers and the evangelists, but for each one of us to go and touch the people that are in our circles.
I think we're touching a lot about like the nature of how the broad sense of the church has waned from what the original New Testament church would have been like. Because it's only a more recent time that the concept of Sunday morning service was to save people. And it's kind of only because there's been more lost people. There's a sense of going out on the highways and byways. That's why street evangelism is a thing. Sunday morning in the New Testament was for the saved. You know why I know that? Because we've been killed if you were out in the open. Which is a weird way to wrap your mind around, because we're now thinking that Sunday morning is the means that we see the most saved. And that's because we have a multitude of lost people that confuse themselves as Christians. To be frank, it's like my grandma went to church and I'm comfortable with it because preachers keep me comfortable with it. I want to tell you what the Word of God is, and I want it to make you uncomfortable to the sense that it makes you want to draw closer.
Well, just like Tracy just said that, you know, it took her out of her comfort zone. We have to be real. okay? When I come here on Sunday morning, as far as minister, part of this church, I'm comfortable here. You know why? Because I know I'm among people that care about me, that we worship together, that we all agree on the same thing. But this is not the harvest field. The harvest field is out there. And you know, if I'm not going out there to do something, then I'm not doing anything. And I think about, as we're studying this, we've seen what happens when people just do not love God with all their heart, their mind, and their soul. You know, anything can come in. We look around today, and I read an article not too long ago that said church attendance right now in the last 3 years has gone down by 60%. 60%. And I'm not talking just little churches. I'm talking mega churches. 60%. Not up 60%, down 60%. And you look at our church, we have got a great core of people. I mean, they are consistent, you know? But then I get to thinking about all of those, Josh that was here when we had the school. I mean, we was packed out every Sunday, you know? But where are those folks now? You know, most of them are not even saved, you know? And, then you think about the people that have come in the last few years. Where are they now? So it's just like this, you know? They had no desire to work the field.
Yeah, you're saying that out there is a field. One day I would love for the front doors to be open. Could you imagine streams from the community out here coming through the front doors? I'm sorry. I love how old this church is because there's a lot of history. You know, this was made to be a community church by all means. And I would love for one day when that door is open, streams of people come.
Well, it's open.
I know, but you know what I mean. I want to see people coming in.
Yeah.
I want to see more than Jason. Let's just say that. But and also thinking about the school. Like, I had two good friends. Once we were called the Sons of Thunder, all three of us.
Yes.
And I know what they've done and what they've fallen. And you know what? It's only by the grace of God that I got dragged back to Christianity. Because I was no better than them. I'll put it there. But only by the grace of God that was me. I would love to see them back. And those who know who I'm talking about should look. It's like, really? I would love to see restoration.
That's right. But you are a man of God. And even though you've been done wrong, you still love them. And you're willing to embrace that. See, that's what we're talking about. We don't have that. We have lost that. And I'm not talking about just church. We have lost that in the world. When you've got people that standing up in America and wanting to tell you to kill your leaders, and there's something wrong with us. You know, I mean, there's really something wrong.
Let's continue into 12. So we got the metaphor of sowing and planting because we got the harvest being talked about. It says, sow yourself in righteousness and reap in mercy. Don't you all want a second chance?
Amen.
Break up the fallow ground. Now the fallow ground, I love this term because it's part of history. When a military force would come in and attack a nation, and then get pushed back, they would want to make sure that the land that they took is not going to be used so they can make a counter strike here. So what they would do is literally salt the ground. You salt the ground, you're not growing plants. Makes it easier for when you've got the next strike to come out and attack. This is to break it up, as in to get rid of the ground that can't be grown on. We talk about the parable of sowing, where there's weeds and there's rocks. Sometimes for us as Christians is to get to know the saved. Begin to pick some weeds out. To take some rocks out. And this rock we're talking about is the stone nature of their heart. The only way you're going to be able to do that, the only way to wage that warfare is with love, which is completely counterintuitive to any sense of warfare. Okay. For the time to seek the Lord till he comes and what? Rains righteousness upon us. So we seek righteousness, but it's not our own righteousness because it's imputed by God to us. And which I absolutely love. Okay, let's go to 13. But ye have plowed wickedness. They're talking about Israel at the time. Or maybe even us right now, we got to wrestle with that. They have reaped, what? Iniquity. And what was they talking about that city I was constantly bringing up? Beth Haven, emptiness or iniquity. I like that comparison between emptiness and iniquity. Because what is God? Righteousness and filling. What did we see even in Genesis? He says the earth was empty and void, but what with his goodness, he wanted to fill it with what? To reflect his nature. His nature. Because it's his nature.
Right.
But sin and iniquity is empty and disgusting. Interesting. Okay. And they have eaten what? The fruit of lies. Can you imagine what that tastes like? I'm thinking like rotten fruit. But that concept of emptiness, it's not going to fill you. He was even talking about like if you plant harvest, there will be no fruit. But even if there was fruit, the wind's going to sweep it away. You can't live on sowing wickedness and iniquity and eating lies. You can't. Why do we got so many murders out here today? Almost every day we broke some record of how many murders happen in our city. Why? Because there's people who are plowing wickedness and reaping iniquity, eating the lie of that. Devaluing human life. Because they has trust in what? Their way! The Bible says there's a way to a man that seems right, but it leads to death. Yeah. It's kind of funny. It's like if only there was someone that said what the way was, the way, Jesus, the way, truth, and life. Their way, lies and death. Emptiness and death. And the multitude of their mighty men. They believe in their power, their military might. And America might talk about how strong their might is in their military, but in a moment it can fail. And even if you read Revelations, it seems like it will fail. Like even when Israel tries to defend himself in Revelation, it's not them that defends them. It's actually God that says He defends them. Don't trust in your own strength, your own pride, your own way. 14. Therefore shall a tumult. Tumult arise among the people, and all the fortresses shall be spoiled as Shemal spoiled Beth Abram. Foreign nouns always get me. In the day of battle, and the mothers were dashed in the pieces upon their children. I kept trying to look into a lot of scholars about exactly what this battle was, and not many people have actually that much history on that, but we get this idea that Shaman was an abbreviation for Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Beth Arbel, which was Arbel, was also a place in Greece where it was named in Greek called Arbel, which must have been a person or someone of importance, or maybe a god. Those are mainly guesses to have a place or house named after it. So Arbel. So it's something that Assyria has already attacked, and Assyria is going to come down and eventually attack Israel. So it's probably a comparison to their battle to what's going to happen to Israel. And it's talking about their fortresses are not going to prevail against them. They're not going to defend them. That's the only reason why you make a fortress, to defend yourself against something. So they're going to fail. And in the Bible, what does it say of another fortress that fails? They talk about hell will not prevail against what? The church. But we have this idea that hell is attacking us. But the sense is, will not prevail in the sense of our onslaught further into their territory. We need to reclaim what hell's marked all over their territory. Reclaim our city streets, and our magistrates, and government places. We need to reclaim them by what? Love. It's the only military force. Okay, there's the verse that says we're more than conquerors in Christ, right? So when you conquer someone, there's normally like an oppressed people. This is what the verse speaks to me in this. But in the sense of more than conquerors, they become your friends. They become loved family members through Christ because Christ conquers them in love. There's no resentment. There was no, curse you, God, for saving me from this. That's what to me it means to be more than a conqueror. It's the fact that this person turned from their ways, have been defeated from what they desired, and now is an ally. And this idea of the mothers dashed into pieces upon their children, this idea of none being spared. I gave Pastor a book called The Innkeeper, and there is a scene in that where it depicts pretty much what happened when Jesus was born, and the children that are younger than 2 were slaughtered, and this mother shields her son, and it's described as her arms are like a steel cage, not letting them get to her son, but then the spear pierces through both of them. This none being spared mentality. And I'm assuming that that's what most mothers would do. If their child was being targeted, they would die trying their best to give that child life. You're seeing that symbolism there. And yet again, we know very little about whatever this battle was. Well, right there is a glimpse of whatever happened, what it was known for. Very graphic. But then I'll go ahead and try to finish 10 with our limited time. Shall Beth-El, which El is references God, or kind of that concept of spiritual beings, but mainly God. So shall Bethel, or the house of God, do unto you because of your great wickedness. He says that God is going to allow these kind of terrifying things to chastise you for your wicked ways, to turn you from His ways. Isn't that very interesting? And you wouldn't really realize that if you did not know what Beth and El meant. They would just be a random city. In a morning shall the kings of Israel, which is the northern kings, utterly be cut off. So he says within a night, overnight, gone, wiped out, judged. And I think that's what we're going to leave off with. Completing chapter 10.
How many more chapters you got?
2 minutes.
I said how many more chapters?
Chapters? We have around 4. This has been.
Take your time.
Yeah.
I like the teaching. Take your time.
If you think anyone else would like it, or you want to brush up on anything, it's out there. See, I like recording this because, again, my son, the reason why he ain't in here, is I don't think he would stand the idea of children dying, and especially whatever happened in Gibeah. Oh my word, so many years before I can be able to say that. But I want to give him, if he ever comes to me, there's people that start reading the Bible in Genesis. And then they go to Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's like, oh my word, what happened? No, I knew about the cities, but what happened with him and his daughters? What on earth? I had a buddy of mine do that, and he was like, no, there's reasons, let me explain. I'm telling you, there's answers, but he needs to be a little bit older before he can grasp there's answers.
That's right.
So I want these when he's 16, 14, I don't know.
20.
You can look at, yeah, I sit there was kings at age 10 in the Bible.
Right.
We're not, no, there's one of those at age 8.
Good job, brother.